It's the Choke MMA Show. And now your host, Eric Fontanez.
It's that time of the week again. The Choke MMA Show is back. I am your host, as always, Eric Fontanez. And in the Phantom Zone is E. Spencer Kite. ESK, how you been the last week, brother?
I'm okay, man. I'm getting my General Zod on again. It's always a good time to be out here in the Phantom Zone. Regardless of how long it takes us to get going, we are back in your life. We are back in action. And
yes.
We're going to argue.
We are going to argue.
I'm excited about this.
We're going to disagree passionately.
Like let's just put it out here right now. If you are interested in co-hosting the Choke MMA Show with Eric Fontanez, starting next Tuesday, there will be a vacancy because there's going to be a large Brazilian contingent that's like, get him off the show. He can't be on the show anymore when we get around to talking about Phil Davis and Lyoto Machida.
Yeah, Phil Davis and Lyoto Machida fought at UFC 163. I wrote a column about it saying that Lyoto Machida got robbed. The next day or the day of, ESK over here sent me a tweet saying people's ridiculous overreaction to that fight and something of the sort. And I looked at that tweet and I said, you know what? It's probably a shot at me. Might not be a shot at me, but you know what? I'm accepting it as such.
It wasn't a shot at you. It was a shot at as they said, the gross overreaction, in my opinion. And your response was, we're going to argue, aren't we?
Yes.
And I said yes.
And I very much look forward to that. So, but I think the one thing that needs to be mentioned here is that UFC 163 went down last Saturday in Brazil. And in the main event, we had Jose Aldo defending his title against the Korean zombie, Chan Sung Jung. A lot of people weren't really excited about the fight while it was happening. ESK, I know you're one of the people that says there's no such thing as boring in MMA. So what was your take, or what was your reaction to the fight as it was going on?
Watching it as it was going on and not knowing what we know now, I was not confused. It didn't play out the way I expected. I mean, we're used to seeing Jose Aldo throw leg kick after leg kick after leg kick. He threw one early, landed nice and crisp. Looked like it was going to be sort of the start of that steady diet of leg kicks. And then he didn't throw anymore. And then, more surprising, he shot in for a takedown and started showing off his wrestling. Stuck to a pretty, not safe, but stuck to a pretty technical, quick game plan of jabs and some striking, some boxing, mixed in his wrestling a bunch. And we came to learn afterwards that it's because he broke his foot. And you can go back and
I was about to cut you off, by the way. I was going to cut you off and say, you know, he broke his foot. That's why he wasn't throwing any more of those leg kicks.
You find out after the fact that he broke his foot on the very first kick. And if you go back and actually like slow-mo some different places where you can see his foot, it's pretty gruesome looking. Like, it blew up real quick, and the fact that he continued to fight earns Jose Aldo a whole bunch of hero points in my book. And then Chan Sung Jung couldn't get any real offense going. One of the beautiful things about Jose Aldo is that he is so fast and so precise that he's able to beat you and stop whatever forward momentum you have with a stiff jab in the face. And so every time Chan Sung Jung came to start coming forward, he got popped, had to reset, and that was just sort of what we got through to the fourth round until Chan Sung Jung unfortunately dislocated his shoulder, throwing an overhand right, tried to just roll it back in and pop it back in. But
like a true zombie, too. I saw him cringe at the shoulder, and then he just did this whole...
Just kind of, grabbed his arm and tried to pull the arm back up. And then in true savage nature of Jose Aldo, to prove, like, for everybody that says these guys don't have killer instinct and don't whatever, he started kicking the shoulder with his bad foot.
As hard as he could.
Like,
3 consecutive really hard kicks.
I started throwing kicks at his mangled shoulder. And then Herb Dean eventually jumped in and stopped him once they got to the ground, and Jose Aldo was opening up, and then we learned all the things that we have learned subsequently. So it sort of reshapes the way we look at the fight and think of the fight. But it was different than what I expected. I love watching Jose Aldo fight just because I think he is maybe the best mix of speed, technique, power, and sort of that ability to be dynamic when he wants to be.
Right.
The interesting thing to me right now is that since he's transitioned to the UFC, outside of the Chad Mendes fight that ended with a really incredible knee to the face after a fence grab.
Knee to the face?
He hasn't been that dynamic fighter that we saw in the WEC. He hasn't been the guy. When we talk of Jose Aldo, we always talk in terms of, his incredible power and his finishing ability and some of those highlight reel wins that we saw, but we haven't seen that in the UFC yet. And I'm very much interested to see whether that's a function of who he's been fighting on the biggest stage, and sort of the pressure and responsibility and opportunity that comes with that of maintaining that title, or if it's just a matchup thing and it takes the right guy to sort of draw the Jose Aldo of old back out of him.
Yeah, now, you're right in that he hasn't had the same highlight reel type of finishes that he's had in the WEC since he came to the UFC, but that's not to say that he's not a phenomenal fighter and worthy of holding the title. I mean, at 145 pounds, there really isn't a lot better than Jose Aldo. No. I mean, the UFC has about 50 or so fighters on their roster at 145 pounds, and if you were a betting man and you bet Jose Aldo to win in every single one of those fights, there's a good chance you could go 50-0. But that being said,
be okay with him going up to lightweight and still betting on Jose Aldo,
yeah.
Which is probably the next frontier, which is probably something that he was supposed to fight Anthony Pettis. That was going to be the measuring stick of sort of how he fits in that division, which is stacked full of talent.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if that comes back up again once he's ready to fight.
Yeah, and I think, though, they really haven't talked about his next fight or what have you, but I think it's going to be still at 145 pounds, and Lamas, I think, is the next guy to step up and take the fight. And I also wrote this. I think Lamas is by far the next number one contender, regardless of whatever the official UFC rankings say. I think they have Chad Mendes up there as the number one contender.
Yep.
Lamas 2 or 3. I think Lamas should get the next fight. Mendes and Swanson are being thrown around as names. Even Swanson's even going to Twitter and trying to do one of those Twitter campaigns that we've talked about on previous episodes with, hashtagging his last name and Aldo's last name.
Hashtag Aldo Swanson.
Exactly.
With a little smiley face.
With a little smiley face. And it's just like, hey, yeah, that's great that you're using social media to your advantage, but I just don't think it's going to happen. I mean, he lost to Aldo already. And he also
lost to Ricardo.
He also lost to Ricardo Lamas. So it's like, does this guy really deserve a shot? I mean, he's been on an impressive run lately. True. But I don't think he gets it ahead of Lamas. Do you think that Lamas should get the next spot, or do you think it should go to somebody else, CSK?
Oh, no, I'm very much in. If I had to brand myself, I would brand myself as Team Lamas. I've gotten a chance. Yeah, man, I've gotten a chance to get to know Rick a little bit over the last year and talk to him a bunch over the course of these fights where he's sort of become this contender that is still forgotten somehow. I mean, absolutely trounced Eric Koch, who was set up to fight for the title.
Right. Before
that, beat Hatsu Hioki, a guy that had turned down an opportunity to fight for the title because he had wanted another fight. Beat Cub Swanson before that. Was supposed to fight the Korean Zombie here at UFC 162. That got bumped and changed, obviously. We spoke the other night, and he's very much on the offensive here of making sure that he is next in line, that no one else jumps in front of him. If the UFC decides that he needs to fight and that they need to move forward with the division while Jose Aldo recovers, he'll cross that bridge when he comes to it, but he's holding out for that title shot, as I think he should, and I think there's no one else. You mentioned it. he fought Cub Swanson, and the thing he said to me was it would be different if Cub and I went to a decision and it was close or split or whatever. I finished him before the midway point of the second round. So it's not like this was some sort of haphazard decision that people are debating. I finished him. I finished Eric Koch after that. Beat Hatsuhioki in between. What more do I need to do? And I think he's right. I think he deserves the opportunity. I think he's earned the opportunity, more important than anything.
Absolutely.
But this is the UFC, and stranger things have happened, man.
Absolutely. You know, a name that came to mind over the weekend after the fights was a guy that is getting a lot of attention right now at 145 pounds. Conor McGregor. I know that he just got to the UFC. He's not even ranked in the official top 10 rankings or anything like that. But just I look at things based off of face value. And just looking at McGregor's precision and speed and technique versus Brimage made me say, wow, if this guy got into a fight with Aldo, that would be a scrap. Like I'd be genuinely excited to see that fight happen. And I'll be honest with you, I haven't seen a 145-pound fight get matched and me look forward to it yet. I mean, even with Jose Aldo versus Frankie Edgar, I just okay, we'll see this fight and we'll report on it, but I wasn't excited about it. But if McGregor was put up there, I got tingles up my spine. What do you think of that fight?
I think it's going to happen. I think it's probably a year away at most. I mean, I can tell you from getting the chance to go into SBG when I was over in Ireland on my little hiatus from this show.
That's right, because you needed a hiatus like 2 or 3 weeks in, right?
After 2 weeks in or something like that. I got a chance to go into SBG in Ireland and meet with John Kavanagh and Conor McGregor and Cale Pendred and the team over there. And I mean, he is a scary proposition for anybody in that division. As much as you said, it's one fight. He's only been in the UFC for one fight. His second fight's coming up in little over 10 days' time now against Max Holloway, which should be a really entertaining fight on the FS1 card. The precision is there. The talent is there. The skill set is there. Bigger than anything to me, and this comes across when you talk to Conor, is the confidence is there. And it's not the robust pump myself up confidence. Yeah. It's the Chris Weidman, I believe I can do this. I believed in myself from the first day I started taking this serious, and there's no one that's going to stop me or tell me otherwise. Right. His quote when we talked, and I said, you're finally at this point where you wanted to be all along. How does it feel comparatively? Like, now that you're a superstar? And he kind of laughed and said, I've been a superstar all along, just everybody didn't know it.
Damn.
And that's, some people would look at that and be like, oh, cocky SOB, but
nah, man,
when you sit back and think about it,
I'm thinking confident.
That's what it takes to get to that level. That's what it takes to be elite and to separate yourself from the pack. And he has it. And I mean, John Kavanagh, his coach, we talked extensively on that trip, and I mean, he said inside of 2 years, he's got a belt around his waist, if not 2. He fought at 55 in Cage Warriors. He was, after that fight with Marcus Brimage, he tried to pick fights with middleweights. He was getting in Twitter fights with whoever he could. He was going at Sean Shelby and the UFC to get another fight right away, and needed John Kavanagh to hold him back and be like, listen, enjoy this break. Go do the crap you got to do. He's so gifted, man. And people think
that guy is such a beast.
People think that we're making too much of it. And listen, we've seen lots of people come and go that, blow up that hype train first fight. And we talk about them like they're the next big thing and they fizzle out. But this is a kid that legitimately championship potential, star power to the hilt.
Yep.
And if he puts together a couple of wins, the UFC won't hesitate to put him into a title fight.
Absolutely. And that's one thing we could agree on. But
yes,
the thing we can't agree on, Spencer, is the decision that was the co-main event at UFC 163 Lyoto Machida versus Phil Davis.
Yes.
As everyone knows by now, or should know by now if you're an MMA fan, is that Phil Davis won a unanimous decision 29-28. Immediately following that call, Twitter blew up.
Twitter exploded, yeah.
Yes, Twitter's site traffic just pretty much hit the whale. And everybody disagreed with it for the most part. Most people just said that it was a robbery. Machida got robbed and got done dirty. And just by the reaction that Davis had immediately following his name being called, he jumped on Eric Del Fierro and was just like, I can't believe I won. And and I
similar to the Rashad Evans beating Nogueira win of like, oh me?
Oh
Sweet.
yeah.
That's
exactly.
my name. My hands are up now.
In the Phantom Zone. So the thing that I saw was Phil Davis securing 2 takedowns.
Yes.
And then going 2 for 10 overall in takedowns. And then him getting a unanimous decision. I before I go on to my rant, I want to hear your explanation for why you think Phil Davis legitimately won that fight. Go.
See, now my argument isn't that Phil Davis legitimately won that fight. I'm not.
Well, what's your stance then? Because you said it was an overreaction.
My stance is that everybody's saying that it's a robbery and there's absolutely no way you could score that fight for Phil Davis. It's crazy.
Okay, why is it crazy?
Because it was a close fight, and I think what always happens in these situations is people manipulate data and manipulate statistics and sort of impressions of fights to fit their argument. So to use yours, because this is the GRACIEMAG.com Choke MMA show, and you wrote The Guard Passed, where you talked about this being a ridiculous decision.
Thank you for plugging my stuff, by the way.
Problem, dude. I got you. See? King of this stuff.
Yeah.
Listen, I break it down like this. I think third round, there's no question it is Lyoto Machida's round, and Judge Chris Watts turning in a 10-9 for Phil Davis is absolutely ridiculous. I will agree with you on that point 100%.
Thank you, good sir.
If you flip that, that makes it a split decision win for Phil Davis, 2 judges, 29-28 for him. Chris Watts, if he wasn't, blind and crazy, 29-28 for Lyoto Machida.
Right.
I think the second round is Phil Davis's. The striking is close on the full total complete strikes count. Phil Davis outlanded Machida something like 11-7, 8-7 in terms of significant strikes. Hit that late takedown, threw some knees to the body, which aren't busting anybody up, but they're strikes that register. They
were effective strikes. I will give you that.
They were effective strikes. So that puts us at 1 round each, which means the first round is the swing round.
We're going backwards from third to first.
Right, we're working backwards just to get to the swing round and sort of the tough round. Total striking was 12-10 for Phil Davis. They threw a combined 47 strikes. So it's not like we were watching this slugfest where both guys are landing in great numbers. Significant strikes was 10-8 Machida, so Phil had the overall edge. Lyoto had the significant edge. And there was the takedown in there. And listen, I'm not saying takedowns deserve to be scored. I think takedowns are scored far too liberally in this sport. And Phil didn't do much with that takedown.
He didn't. And that's
we
where...
know this is the way the sport is scored. So to have that reaction of, oh my God, Lyoto clearly won every one of these rounds and got absolutely robbed, when the striking data shows you and the fight metric data shows you that it was a close fight in terms of significant strikes, and that it, just watching the fight, you can see that it's a close fight. Lyoto had that flurry in the first round that Brian Stan and Mike Goldberg got really excited for, and everybody always gets excited for. There were no strikes
landed in that one. I'll admit
where
that one.
3 of 9 strikes landed, and
the most effective strike in there was the kick that he threw as Davis went down to try to clinch him.
Right, and so the other part of it, to me, I think, is that we always sort of get caught up in the mystique of Lyoto Machida, and we're so used to him being such an effective counter striker that when he does land, we sort of, if it was anybody else in that fight and they fought with that strategy and they waited to counter, we would talk about them being passive, not doing enough, they didn't land, and we would be okay with a close decision. But because it's Lyoto Machida, we look at what he does land and say, but they were all great strikes and they were all really effective strikes. And for me, the numbers bear out that it was a really close fight in terms of strikes landed. I don't think you can look at it in terms of Phil only landed 2 out of 10 takedowns as a whole, because they're scored by rounds. And so he was 1 of 2 in round 1, which is a 50% success rate, which if you use that stat counters he only scored 20% fairly well. I think people overreacted to this being a robbery, because to me, it was a close fight that I very much could have seen being scored as a split decision. I was surprised that it went Phil Davis's way. Okay. I scored it for Lyoto Machida, but I think to go into this, oh my God, worst decision. Like, there have been bad decisions in the UFC this year. This is not necessarily one of them.
I'll disagree with you there. I think this is a pretty bad decision on behalf of the judges. I mean, you said it even at the beginning of your rant. Watts scored at 10-9 for Davis in the third round. That is just ridiculous right there. Horrible. And another thing is that I don't think people are caught up in the mystique of Machida anymore. I think that mystique went out in 2010 when Shogun finally beat him, as he should have in the first match, but we won't get into that.
Speaking of bad decisions.
Speaking of bad calls. When that happened, the mystique of Machida and the Machida era ended. People figured him out. He's a counterpuncher. He moves laterally very well. So that I don't harp on at all. The fact that judges scored the first round for Davis at all is what's really shocking to me. Because sure, he scored 1 takedown. That was pretty much the only bright spot for him in that entire round. Machida controlled the pace of the fight. I think you mentioned that he landed more effective strikes too, right?
Yeah, 10-8 Machida in terms of significant strikes.
And then I think the judges gave Davis that round based on the strikes that he landed after the takedown, and none of them were effective. None of them even hit the takedown in the second round where he had the knees and the elbows. Right. Those were effective strikes. The strikes that he landed after the takedown in the first round were nothing. They grazed him. They missed. They just did everything but hit him. And then they scored it for him. That blew my mind. So is it the fact that Machida is this phenomenal fighter and that he keeps getting done dirty? No. It's the fact that they just didn't know what they were looking at. They scored things for him that shouldn't have been scored. And I don't think people are saying, this is something that happens in MMA. I'm going to overreact to it. No. People shouldn't have to deal with the facts as they are. They shouldn't have to say, okay, judges are bad, we'll just deal with that. No. The fact is the judging should be fixed. Okay. Scoring fights.
100%.
What's that?
I agree 100%, and
100%.
Talked about that on. Yeah, there's your 100% for the show.
Yeah, the fact is judging is a problem in MMA. Judging is a problem in a lot of sports, combat sports anyway. And you're always going to run into that problem. And we always say that. You never want to leave it in the hands of the judges. But you know what, man? That's a cop-out.
Saying in the sport.
It is stupid. It's a total cop-out. Why should we have to say, okay, this is the way it is, and we're just going to have to deal with it? Forget that. Change needs to happen. Whoever does it, whoever spearheads it, please do so as soon as possible, because ESK and I can't do it. We're just podcasters with this stupid little web show that we do every week. So we don't have a voice that big anyway. So that's where I think the overreaction that you so described came from, is the fact that judging has been, for lack of a better word, shit forever since the UFC gained popularity, and I'm just tired of it, man.
Yeah, if it's a compound reaction to all the bad decisions and oh my God, this keeps happening, then that's fine. I think a lot of people sort of stepping back from the last sort of the first 24 hours, or even the immediate, I mean, in this day and age, the first 4 hours. I think once people went and go back and watch the fight a second time, I saw lots of people that said, okay, it wasn't as egregious a decision as I thought. I still scored it for Machida, but I can see how Phil gets some points and maybe gets that second round. And I didn't think he deserved the first, but I can see where, and that's where we get into talking about things like you and I have mentioned in there about takedowns. I agree with you 100% that the 100%. Don't let it go to the judges is the biggest cop out in MMA. I talked about it on Fox Sports the day after the event, saying, we can't continue to do this. Every time Dana White says it, every time they say it on a broadcast, to me, it's an insult to the guys that were just in the cage trying their damnedest to win a fight, to then say, well, look, these guys are idiots. You left it up to them. You should have went out and done more. Like, we need to fix the problem, not just make excuses for it.
And here's the thing. Did you read my column, by the way, or did you just skim the first paragraph and say, you know what, Eric's an idiot?
I read your column.
Thank you. Did you get the last piece of the section about Davis and Machida? Judges failed us again. Did that not describe to you that I was frustrated with the overall sense of judging?
Yes, indeed.
Well, there you go.
But
that should have described my reaction.
Else and said that this was a ridiculous robbery and screwed and all of those emotional reactions. So
you did get
my
screwed.
argument was to the emotional, initial visceral.
You should be happy that I'm getting passionate and emotional about MMA.
I am. It's true.
Because you know as well as anybody else in this business that I am very bitter with this sport at the moment.
Yes.
So
there was some apathy there. And it's good to see you fired up again. And if it took a questionable decision to light that fire again,
so be it. So I guess bad calls aren't so bad after all.
Well, I mean, bad calls are awful. And it sucks when it robs a guy that deserved to win of a victory. I think this was a close fight, and I could see it going either way. We talked about it in Seattle in the post-fight with Dana White, because that card had a couple questionable scores and results where there was 30-27s on both sides, which is, if you've watched any MMA fight or you've done any kind of judging course, you know that is really, really rare and probably never happens. Probably shouldn't ever happen, where you can make a case for either guy winning all 3 rounds. And Dana's reaction was the same as always, and it's so frustrating, and we sort of brought it up to him and talked about it more and got into it more, because his response is always, yeah, that's the athletic commission. These guys, like, they keep bringing these.
I am so tired of that excuse.
Most powerful organization in the sport, and as much as you do not, for the most part, control who the judges are and who the officials are assigned to events, you still wield a lot of power. And if fighters can veto certain referees officiating their fight, there needs to be some checks and balances in place where the organization can say, this guy has been awful. Here is the data that shows this guy has been awful. We don't want him on this card.
Absolutely.
And until, to me, and it's never going to happen because Nevada is one of the biggest offenders, and that's where the UFC is based.
Yeah.
But to me, it would be great if until these athletic commissions started finding some way to test, license, qualify, whatever, these judges that keep making mistakes, the UFC said, you know what? We're going to take our show elsewhere, and we're going to spend this money and bring this money somewhere else. Get your house in order. Yeah. Then we would see some change. But that's not going to happen because the UFC continues to make their money regardless of these horrible decisions. Dana gets to say, not our fault, man. Nothing we can do about it. And it's a cop-out to me, and it needs to change, the same as the don't let it go to the judges.
Well said. So here we have the Choke MMA Show viewer mail. What's going to happen is I'm going to read the question. I'm going to have ESK answer it because he is by far the smarter one out of the two of us. I just happen to get paid more. So, yes. ESK, are you ready for viewer mail?
I am. Let's do this.
This one comes from somebody we call the Dunlop. Who is more likely to lose his belt this year? Ben Henderson, Cain Velasquez, or GSP?
Interesting. I could honestly see any of those three losing. If we're going most likely, I'm going to say Cain Velasquez, and I'll qualify this in that it's heavyweights. And we saw in the first fight between Cain and Junior that all it takes is one punch. That obviously applies across other divisions as well. Mm-hmm. George St. Pierre has a very challenging fight with a heavy-handed Johnny Hendricks coming up. Mm-hmm. And we've seen Johnny ice a couple people with that big left hand. I don't know that GSP gives him an opportunity to land that shot. George is a very technical and very tactical guy. I think he will do everything in his power to avoid that shot and look to make it a wrestling match, which Johnny Hendricks could still win a wrestling match with George St. Pierre. Ben Henderson obviously has fought Anthony Pettis in the past. Anthony Pettis won a very close fight that gave us the Showtime kick.
Absolutely.
Which is, I don't know about you, but I still remember watching that fight live and freaking out when
I jumped out of my seat.
As did I. My dog, anytime I speak loudly, or as my wife calls it, yell.
What?
I think of it as speaking loudly because there's a whole nother octave above speaking loudly that registers as yelling. My dog goes nuts, and my dog was running around our living room going crazy because I was screaming at the television because Anthony Pettis just done run up the side of the cage and kick Ben Henderson in the face. But my answer for the Dunlop would be Cain Velasquez, simply because we've, seen what happens. It can happen in heavyweight fights where literally one punch changes the course of the fight, changes the direction of things. We all went into the second fight thinking, or maybe not all of us, but lots of people went into the second fight thinking, after the first fight, Junior's got this, he knows the blueprint, he does this, and one shot changed everything Junior Dos Santos was going to do, started Cain Velasquez on the right path. Of course, in the first fight, the big shot went the other way and ended the night for Cain Velasquez. So I'm going to say the heavyweights just because the probability of a finish, it's a belt that hasn't been defended more than twice ever.
Right.
And so that's sort of in there as well. Cain has successfully defended it once, beating Junior for the second time and taking the lead in their trilogy would give him two defenses. Mm-hmm. I think Cain will win, but if I have to pick out of those three, I'm going to go with the heavyweights.
And then that would be a UFC record for the heavyweights with 3 consecutive title defenses.
Right.
Yeah? Could be exciting. I'm going to say Benson Henderson. And this is no knock against Benson or anything like that. I'm still pretty confident that he's going to win against Anthony Pettis at UFC 164, or whichever number it is. I don't remember off the top of the head.
164.
Yes. But we've seen him be susceptible to that Showtime kick in the past. I know it was 3 years ago. I know he's gotten better. I know he's a black belt in jiu-jitsu now. You don't have to tell me all the reasons why he's not going to win. I'm just saying...
You know that the Showtime kick isn't going to happen again.
I didn't say the Showtime kick was going to happen again. I'm just saying that he's susceptible to things like that, where he's something unexpected happens and he gets taken. Right. So I'm just going to go with that as the most likely. Not saying he's going to lose, but the most likely. Now, for the next question, this one comes from Rob. Rob asks, what are your thoughts on a Cain Velasquez versus John Jones super fight? ESK, light heavyweight champ versus heavyweight champ?
Sign me up.
Sign you up?
Sign me up. Sign me up like 6 months ago. Sign me up instead of the trilogy fight.
Hey, there you go.
We talked about this a while ago, and we talked about it sort of when the trilogy was starting to come together and everything happened at UFC 160 that made this the possibility. I'm very much interested in seeing Cigano and Cain fight for a third time, but a third time inside of 2 years feels really compacted to me. With there not being a ton of guys in the heavyweight division that have done enough to sort of merit a title shot at this point, and with John Jones having been John Jones for the last couple of years, we've always talked about John going up to heavyweight, it being an inevitable thing. I think he would beat a number of guys that are currently in the top 10 at heavyweight. And so if you're going to do it, to me, super fights have always been, if you're going to do them, if a guy's going to go up in weight like John Jones, go right to the top, make the biggest fight you can, because it is such a waste if you make something in the middle and that guy happens to lose. Mm-hmm. Not that I ever expected Anderson Silva to lose to James Irvin. Forrest Griffin was sort of a maybe, because we weren't sure if Forrest was completely done yet. At least he had a championship pedigree, but Anderson absolutely clowned him, and we all realized we were crazy for maybe thinking Forrest could win that fight.
Yeah.
Same with Stephan Bonner. There was no chance he was winning that fight. But it's just such a risk that if you're going to do it to the highest degree, make the biggest fight you can, sell out Cowboys Stadium or wherever you want to do it. And I would be on board yesterday, tomorrow, whenever, because I think they're two guys in the prime of their career, at the top of their division. And if we're going to do these fights, let's do the ones that are really cool and that have the potential of actually happening organically as well.
So who do you think would win the fight?
I think if they fought right now, I would pick Cain Velasquez just because of the size difference. I think once John Jones decides to commit to that move and starts putting on some muscle and starts putting on some bulk, I'm taking John Jones. To me, John Jones is going to do things in this sport when it's all said and done that we look back on and absolutely marvel at. Obviously he has that disqualification loss on his record, so he's not going to have that Anderson Silva streak yet. I think he could still get there. I think he's the type of fighter that comes along once in a generation and just ends up doing things that we look back on and go, oh my, just can't believe it happened. We'll forever look to who is the next John Jones. And the reality to me is that there's not going to be another John Jones. He is one of a kind.
Absolutely. I agree. And since we're picking fights, I think I need to mention that Ivan the Tech guy had a winning percentage with his UFC 163 picks. He told you could take him to the bank, and if you did, then congratulations on your vast earnings. If you bet.
A couple of bucks.
Yeah, probably $5. Happy Meal at McDonald's. Don't know. Anyway, Ivan the Tech guy. He's a smart one. Although he
and it earns him a spot back for the next
MMA
set of
for
picks.
fun. Yeah. How about that? Ivan the Tech guy, by the way, is recording this episode of the Choke MMA show. He's a very intelligent guy, but he just scratched his balls in front of me, so it was kind of uncomfortable. But, whatever. He's Ivan the Tech guy, and we love him. ESK, you're lucky you didn't see that since the camera's pointed on you.
Being in the Phantom Zone.
Yeah, the Phantom Zone is the safe zone, apparently.
My safe zone now, yeah.
So that's our show, buddy. Good show.
You don't want to talk about the super awesome, great big, oh my god, epic battle that's coming to Bellator in November?
No. Not.
I can barely keep a straight face for that. Bjorn Rebney, if you happen to be listening, if you happen to watch this show, if you need to hold a press conference to tell everybody why your fight is so awesome and so important and so meaningful that everyone should watch it, it's not that important.
Exactly. You don't have me sold, brother. Sorry. But Tito versus Rampage on pay-per-view, maybe 7 years ago. Not in 2013.
No.
And with that, I am your host, Eric Fontanez, for E. Spencer Kite. This is the Choke MMA Show. Peace.